So next up, Joe Biden, speaking of the election, Joe Biden is in a whiny mood, ladies and gentlemen. So podcast listeners, Joe Biden is in a whiny mood. The Biden bus, it's a bus with, Biden for president, was in Texas. And Kamala Harris was actually in the bus because she was campaigning in Texas. I don't know why they're campaigning in Texas. They are not going to win Texas. They're not. You can't say to the American people, you're going to get rid of oil and gas and then go to Texas and think you're going to win. That just shows you how out of touch they are, especially Kamala Harris. But the bus in Texas, the Biden bus, which Kamala Harris was in, was prevented from getting to its destination because there was a Trump parade that was completely organic and organized by Trump supporters. It was so massive that they were interfering with the campaign bus of Kamala Harris. So the Trump parade was interrupting the Biden campaign in Texas as well as in New Jersey. So two separate parades, obviously. And in New Jersey, it was on the New Jersey Garden State Parkway. So Joe Biden was asked about this. I think it was in Delaware. He was asked, this is just a day ago, like, well, what do you think about where the election is now? And Biden is completely and utterly upset about the fact that these parades are even occurring and that they're interfering with Kamala Harris trying to get to her destination. I want to make it clear, in Texas, they weren't like, cutting them off or being disrespectful. It's just that the parade was so massive, it delayed Kamala's arrival at her next campaign destination. That's really what happened. It just delayed her. So as a result of that, they tried to make, of course, Biden in particular, in this particular clip, he tries to make it look like the Trump people are really mean and they're dangerous and they're revolutionaries and they're bad people. So two takeaways from the clip that you're about to hear where Biden talks about this. First thing, look at how thick Joe Biden's mask is and ask yourself the question, why? Oh, that's a whole nother conversation that we're going to talk about after this clip, but also listen to what Biden says. And here is the clip.
And it was on Interstate Highway in Texas. And a bunch of Trump trucks, pickup trucks with Trump flags, tried to run it off the road. We're stopping in front of it. And the president saw it, took the video that someone had taken, and tweeted it back out and said, "I love Texas. I love Texas." When I was here in Philly earlier today, there are 80 Trump pickup trucks with flags riding around my block, beeping their horns for a couple hours. They just shut down, they shut down the Garden State Parkway, blocked it. We've never had anything like this. At least we've never had a president who thinks it's a good thing.
So Joe Biden says, we've never had anything like these Trump parades before, where the pickup trucks and cars have American flags and Trump flags and don't tread on me flags and really patriotic supporters of the United States of America and of the president. And he's saying it's Trump's fault that these are occurring. I can tell you this firsthand, podcast listeners, that these parades, right, whether they be boat parades or car parades, are completely and utterly organic. These are individuals using Facebook primarily, and they're using Facebook to create events that are parade events. And they're actually going out and randomly starting a parade and saying, hey, meet us on Saturday at 10 a.m. And guess what? Literally 500 cars show up. It's organic. It's not being paid for. They're not being paid like the Biden people are being paid to show up. They're not being paid like the Harris people are being paid to show up. These are Americans who are really concerned about the direction of their country if Biden-Harris got in office. And they're creating these parades. And Joe Biden is saying, well, they're even going around my house and it's Donald Trump's fault. Well, they're not interrupting Biden at his house. They're just beeping their horns and saying, vote for Trump, vote for Trump. And they're also going to Biden events because you got the Biden events where you have people in cars. I had this visual, by the way. So a Biden event, you have people in cars, right? and they don't get out of their cars. They just beep the horn as Joe Biden talks. You know, it's like beep, 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 beep. But if you notice, they never pan the cameras to the audience of cars, right? Because they don't want to show you how few cars there are. Because even if there were 100 cars, that's what, maybe 400 people, 4 people per car, versus 25, 30,000 people at Trump events. I mean, you would then really have a contrast as to how many people actually support Joe Biden and how many people do not. But nonetheless, my visual is that there's Joe Biden speaking at one of his events, and basically what you have is a bunch of people, they're in wheelchairs with the little like horns, you know, it's like just because Joe's so geriatric. And in the clip that you just heard, did he not look and sound geriatric? He just sounded exhausted, which is understandable, but he hasn't even come close to keeping a campaign schedule like Donald Trump. And the man look, here's the thing. There's no doubt as President of the United States, you age rapidly because you're working 7 days a week, probably 14 to 16 hours a day, very little, if any, downtime. No question about it. There's no way Joe Biden can handle this. It's so obvious that Kamala is going to be, you know, she's kind of the Manchurian candidate who the left really wants to be president of the United States. So here's the thing. In that clip also, you heard Joe say, yeah, but, you know, the Trump people, you know, they're going out there and they're having parades. So here's my question. What about the riots, Joe? The Trump people are peaceful, patriotic Americans. What about the riots? What about the riots? Why aren't you talking about that? What about the fact that every major city in America is having to board up the cities because of the fact that they're terrified, the small businesses are terrified, and the building owners are terrified of the riots that are going to ensue after this election, no matter who wins. I mean, the riots are being conducted by Democrats, without question. These are all registered Democrats. I'm sure some are registered, you know, communists or whatever, if you can even register as a communist, or maybe they're independents who don't have a choice of registering as a communist, but that's really what they are. But let's face it, the vast majority of them are Democrats. And Joe talks about the Trump parades, which are interfering with his bus tour in Texas or interfering on the Garden State Parkway. I mean, they're just so bad. That Donald Trump is so bad. Joe, this is part of campaigning, right? This is the hardcore campaigning at the end of a campaign where you get to watch both candidates and you see the intensity of the campaigns. You see peaceful Trump parades of patriotic Americans versus the rioters who are the Democrats who support you. And all you need to do is look in the inner cities and you will see what the Democrats have created. In Washington, D.C., ladies and gentlemen, in Washington, D.C., we just saw a report in Washington, D.C., and we're close to Washington because we're in Annapolis. That's where we broadcast this podcast from, by the way. In downtown Washington, D.C., block after block after block is boarded up. That's the nation's capital. That is the most shameful thing for our country, for our republic, is to see the capital of the country boarded up because of Democrat rioters. And the fact that the media won't even report about this, the mainstream media, you won't see Washington, D.C. boarded up on CNN or MSNBC or CBS or NBC or ABC. You won't see that. No, you will only see that on maybe a couple of news stations, or maybe you can hear it on a podcast. So I just got to tell you, I'm just really concerned, not just about the election of who gets elected, but I'm also concerned about what happens the night of the election and the weeks after the election when these rioters think that they can just get away with it. And these blue city mayors are going to just let them do it. They are. So Biden says Trump is going to steal this election, yet another reason why they're boarding things up, because the Democrats have set the table of convincing the American people that the President of the United States is not going to leave the White House if he loses, which is nonsense. Or that the President of the United States can only win if he steals the election, which is the same talking point that Adam Schiff and others have been telling you since 2016, except now it's 2020, and we have a new election, and they're using the same stuff which is why they have incited the Democrat Party, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They've incited these riots by saying this awfully dangerous stuff. It really is. So Biden says, Trump is going to steal this election, but Biden isn't going to let him do it. We have a clip on this, and here it is.
The president's allies today have been talking quite a bit about maybe declaring victory on Tuesday night, even if the votes aren't final, if he seems to be up ahead. What's your response?
My response is the president's not going to steal this election.
Once again, so if you are a Democrat who has gone to the extreme side, or you're a progressive who has gone to the extreme side, and you are leaning on the fence about whether you want to go out and start rioting election night, and you're leaning on the fence because of the fact that you've been listening for months and months and months about, if not years, about how Donald Trump has colluded with Russia, and now months and months in 2020 about how Donald Trump is setting the table to steal the election, and then you hear your candidate, Joe Biden, say that, you just heard, that might cause you to, get on the other side of the fence with the rioters and say, oh, that's it, I've had it, I'm gonna go riot. That is why it is so dangerous. And there's only one candidate. There's only one candidate in this election who's talking about rioting, and that's Joe Biden. He's literally, Nancy Pelosi, of course, the Democrat Party, but their top Democrat is literally encouraging unrest by saying, yeah, of course he's going to try to steal the election, but we're not going to let him steal the election. Well, what does that mean? It means you're not going to let him steal the election by using the courts. And secondly, you're not going to let him steal the election because you're going to encourage your people to riot. That's what this is all about. That's what this is all. And I can't imagine that we're living in this country in 2020 where there's a political party that thinks it's okay to board up the cities and prepare America for sustained rioting over the fact that the poor snowflakes can't take the fact that their candidate didn't win in a free and fair election. Nonsense. Nonsense. And shame on NBC, shame on ABC and CBS, shame on MSNBC, and shame on CNN for not covering this in a fair way and talking to the American people about the fact that we do have free and we do have fair elections. And the outcome of elections and what makes us different from banana republics and third world countries is the simple fact that we have a country where we change elected officials peacefully. We have a peaceful transfer of power. And that peaceful transfer of power is incredibly important. It distinguishes us from those countries, and it makes us stronger. Yet the mainstream media will not talk about this because they are so mental. I just don't understand what has happened to journalism.